Punk Rock Elite, a podcast about NoFX. Wait a minute. Red, how on earth did we get here? The happiest place on earth.
The happiest of all of the places.
Hefe Land!
Happy Hefe Land.
Hefe Land. It started out in California, then there was one in Florida. There's going to be one in Paris soon. Hefe Land.
Oh, I can't wait for this week's episode. We finally got to golden NoFX.
We got to vintage. Oh, you can just... the bouquet is stronger. The mouthfeel better, allegedly. So, looking forward to it. I'm Eddie French. I'm with Red Redmond.
Hello.
And we're about to jet off into Hefe Land, which is what we're calling 1992, the year of The Longest Line and White Trash, 2 Heebs and a Bean. The first 2 recordings of NoFX with El Hefe as their, what would go on to become, permanent guitarist.
Absolutely. You know, like this is the lineup.
It's the one, isn't it? It took like nine years, and so he's been the guitarist for just over 30 years now. Still the new guy, but you know, that's fine. Interesting. We haven't spoken a lot about Hefe yet in general, I don't think.
No, not at all. And, you know, like I've been impressed with the earlier albums, but, you know, there's just something about you turn these 2 on and you know you're listening to NoFX.
There is a real shift. I don't know how much of that is down to him. A lot of it, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Him adding the possibility of trumpet and stuff like that, and you know, actual harmonies. They didn't have to bring in members of Bad Religion to do. you know, in-house harmonies, guys. Come on. We won't go crashing in there. That's what the main bit of the episode's for. How have you been, Red?
I've been very well, thank you. Doing good. Looking forward to NoFX at the end of this month.
Yes.
I'm getting excited. I really can't wait.
It's really, really exciting, yes. I don't know when this is going out. We're recording this at the beginning of May. So we've got 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that before we go and see them for what may be the last time. They might do another pass-through, you never know, because they're finishing touring in October 2024. That's when this farewell tour goes. They might be going for another round, but I honestly couldn't say. So... you never know. And during that time, there may be new releases, all sorts of stuff. We don't need to speculate because today we're talking about old records, something everyone can agree on.
And, you know, like, I think these are 2 of the ones that, you know, people will have, like, you know, hold in a dear place in their heart. I mean, like, this is quintessential NoFX.
Yes, that's what we're getting to. We are, but we're not going to race ahead because I've been very fortunate. In fact, today, the day of recording, I received an email from a listener. So that's very exciting. Greg Helegian. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I do apologize if not, Greg. Greg sent us Greg from New Jersey. I've just seen there, which is a lot easier to pronounce than Helegian. But Greg said, started with Rock On, which I thought was a really sort of ending way of that was like a sign-off, but it's a fine way to start. Start as you mean to go on. Thank you, Greg. Enjoying the podcast. Oh, go on.
Oh, no, I'm just saying I like his enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah, no, the enthusiasm is great, and we very appreciate that. Enjoying the podcast, and I like the format of the program. Keep it going. Thank you, we will. What is your affiliation with the band, if any? Speaking for myself, absolutely none.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, just big fans.
Just fans, yeah, absolutely, just big fans. I'll tell you for why I got the idea to start the podcast. I mean, I've spoken about why I sort of started the podcast, but there is a specific sort of inspiration, which is a podcast called Unscripted Moments. A podcast about propaganda.
Sure.
And I listened to some of that and I listened to a lot of it. I was listening to some today, actually. And it's a really, really great interview-based show about propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really liked it. And I thought, and with No Effects finishing and me not really knowing how to process that, I thought I'll process it this way. Red, what are you doing? Are you busy? Mistake of saying right at the moment, and now here we are.
I think it's a really good idea, and I think that I hadn't really considered, because I keep talking about how excited I am to see No Effects, because it hasn't really sunk in that I may not be able to see No Effects again,
Yeah.
and like I think we should see this podcast as a type of group therapy for us and our listeners.
I mean, that's certainly what we're using it for, and we appreciate everyone who's enabling our behaviour. They went on to say, Greg went on to say, so Greg, that is our affiliation to NoFX. We have a lot of their records and have seen them live, which makes us exactly as qualified as probably most people listening to this podcast right now. We just had enough spare time to do it. So, there you go. They go on with another question. Do you have any No Effects songs you don't like or an album you don't care for?
That's a great question.
Isn't it?
It's a good question.
It is. That's yeah. I was impressed. I didn't want to ask that of guests because that's sort of a little negative maybe.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
looking
sure.
celebratorily. But certainly to ask us that's a great question. Any springs to mind?
I mean, like, I think there's the obvious, isn't there? There's like, like the tracks in their earlier career where, the humor's a little bit off. I'm thinking of, On the Rag.
Yes.
Or, what is it? Vegetarian Mumbo Jumbo.
Yeah. And there's,
but I think those are obvious. Those are obvious choices, I guess.
Yes, there are one. There's there's one very early song which features the R slur in the title, and that's not something I'm thrilled about. It's also just not very good. It's very, very early. I suppose for songs on what people would think of as more solid, more vintage NoFX albums. Instant Classic is that on Coaster? It's a very short one.
With that one.
I'm swimming in a sea of pee and it sounds like a really sophomore. It's like a real Blink 182 tour of a. It's about 40 seconds long, and I think it also fades out as well, and it occasionally turns up when they do their 10 songs in 2 minutes or whatever, one of those things. An album that I don't like, I suppose I found Self-Entitled a less solid release for me personally, but I still like a lot of the songs on there. I just think it felt a bit bitty, maybe.
Yeah, I think my least favorite so far is maybe S&M Airlines. I think it's got some good tracks on it, but I think as a whole album, I don't enjoy it as, I mean, most NoFX albums for me have like 6 fucking great tracks on it, which is a great average to have on any of your albums. But I think on S&M Airlines, I enjoy Day to Days. And there's a couple other bits that I enjoy, but
Jaundiced Eyes on that one, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, no, very much like that one.
But yeah, overall, it's not.
Overall, I think that's a bit of a weak album. But I would say, like, there isn't an album that I dislike. Even Liberal Animation, I think, has its moments.
Yeah, there's not an album that I would sort of just wouldn't bother getting. Like some of them I don't have on CD. Some of them I don't sort of own physically.
Yeah.
And there isn't a single one that I wouldn't pick up if it was in a charity shop. Like there are some bands who even if I've seen an album which I don't care for, I won't bother getting it because someone else would probably dig on that. Whereas I don't know which charity shop I'd walk, British Heart Foundation with liberal animation in the window. I don't know, but that kind of thing. So if I could pick it up second hand for bit of pocket change, I think I'd do that for all of them, really. But
And I don't think everyone would agree with us. I think there's plenty of people out there that do hate on certain albums of NoFX.
oh yeah,
I know people that dislike Coaster. I know,
yeah.
So like later NoFX, but then I also know people that dislike, early NoFX in liberal animation. And I've
Coaster
heard,
was a grower for me, definitely.
yeah, it is for me.
It took a little while, I have to say. It's I don't know why.
Because I definitely had that experience when I started listening to it, but now I look at the track listings and Coaster's actually, pretty solid. Like some really, really great tracks. I chose it as my favorite album.
You did,
which is interesting because it's one of those like I suppose it is my favorite NoFX album, but I kind of like hadn't realized that myself. I was in denial.
Yes, I was having a look. Yeah, I think the first 4 songs on Coaster are as strong an opener as one could ask for, really.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
We called it America, The Quitter, First Call, and My Orphan Year.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe that was it. Maybe it started out very strong, and because I felt that some of those songs maybe dipped a little later on, maybe that's what I had a problem with. I don't know. I don't anymore. I like it just fine. But yes, well, thank you so much, Greg. Really, really appreciate that. That's a good question. And thank you so much for getting in touch. If anyone else has any questions they'd like to ask, punkrockelitepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you. Like I say, we're recording this at the beginning of May. This may not go out until the end of May. So sorry for the delay in getting back to you, Greg. What we've done is we've got ahead of ourselves. So yeah.
But we would love to hear if there's any, NoFX songs or NoFX albums that you particularly dislike. It's always interesting to hear where people's tastes are at because, obviously art is subjective, but opinions on NoFX are all over the place. Some people hate the later stuff. Some people love the later stuff.
And well, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, between Robin Leach, who said, because you asked Robin whether he felt that NoFX did ska well, whether they were and Paul Smith from the New Cross Inn said, I don't consider NoFX a ska band. I don't go to them for ska, you know, and all the rest of it. So, just in that, there's the two very strong, from two people who know a hell of a lot about ska.
They are a band that, there's something for everyone. And also, I've been thinking recently, and I know, like, I believe I chose my favorite song is The Rationality of Irrationality.
Yes.
But I also I've got a big love for All Out Angst. Like,
yes.
In terms of like their ska numbers, that's my favorite ska number of theirs.
Yes. It's hard to think of a better one, really. Yeah.
Eat the Meat is pretty good.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, so yeah, thank you so much. Again, any questions or any feelings on our answers there, do or just if you want to let us know, just let us know. We're happy to air your positions on things as this. This is your platform as much as not quite as much as ours, but this is your platform as well. So please feel free to chip in. Speaking of chipping in, no, that doesn't work. Speaking of moving on to the next thing, I'm pretty confident that we're both itching to dive into Hefe land. We've got our fast pass wristband barcodes. I'm going to ride the big trumpet first. What are you going to ride?
I'm going to ride that euphemism.
Yeah. Anyway, while I take a cold shower, you and Red travel on this musical sting, and I'll be with you shortly afterwards in the main body of the episode. And here we are. The sun is shining. There are birds singing in the sky, and Hefe Land is just a beautiful place to be today.
Absolutely. I am so excited to talk about these two albums. Obviously, starting
Uh-huh.
with Longest Line EP. Um,
Yes.
now, because I had a real experience like listening to both of these, but what are your first thoughts of these two?
Well, White Trash is the first album from NoFX that we've covered that
Hmm.
I had a copy of when I was younger,
Oh,
when I
cool.
was sort of 16. So 15, 16. Um, a friend of mine, uh, he was possibly the most remarkable music snob I have ever encountered, still to this day. Um, he had older brother itis, in that his older brother was one of those eclectos who, you know, loved all the best bits of different things, was very much that kind of curator. And this lad idolized his brother. And
Hmm.
um, so basically you'd say, "Oh, have you heard of this band?" And he'd go, "Oh, no, no, I haven't." And then he'd come back in the next day and go, "Oh, my brother says they're dog shit," or "My brother says they're amazing," or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, but he said, "Oh, my brother has a No Effects album, I think. Um, Something about We're Trash." I was like, "Oh, White Trash." He's like, "Yeah, something like that." I'm like, "Oh, would you?" And I gave him it because I always had a blank cassette on me at school because I
Hmm.
was always after some free music. So I said, "Oh, would you mind taping it for me?" And he's like, "Yeah, that's fine." And he insisted on recording a Jeff Buckley album on the B side, um, to balance it up. I'm like, "Okay,
Which,
fine."
because he didn't make many albums, like, was
I
it
think it was
Grace?
it was the yeah it was the big one.
Yeah, yeah.
um and so and the thing is, you just sort of finished Buggly Eyes, and then you turn over and you've got delicate finger picking and someone complaining in a falsetto. It's like, don't know that these two go together. I quite like the Jeff Buckley album now, but at the time it was really not what I was looking for. So
Yeah, fair.
probably didn't give it the time I should have done. But so I had that one, and yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was weird. I thought it was weird how different a lot of the songs are.
Yes, absolutely. I
It
think.
doesn't have a sound like
Uh-huh.
So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes sounds cohesive. All of
Yes.
those sound, all the production of it all makes sense together as a record. Whereas this feels like, if you told me it was lots of like singles or 7 inches or whatever put together,
Hmm.
I could believe it.
I mean, I think there's almost an argument for Longest Line sounding almost more cohesive than White Trash. Like, I
Oh, I
mean,
think so.
if you told me that White Trash was a collection of singles that they put together into a studio album, I would believe you.
Yeah, I think possibly Kill All the White Men aside, if you took Kill All the White Men off of the EP,
Hmm.
I think it would be utterly cohesive and
Yeah.
very, they put Kill All the White Men on there, and I'm glad they did because I really like that song. But yeah, very much more. The Longest Line is a much more cohesive piece, and I think the first thing that struck me about both of these records is just how much less heavy the guitars are than the
Yeah.
last three. They go heavier again when they get to Punk and Drublick, like more distortion on the guitars. But in this one, particularly in The Longest Line, some of the guitars are really clean.
Well, I think the thing that I found most interesting is like they kind of it feels like they have their most metal guitarist now, but they sound the most far away from metal that they ever have sounded up to this point.
Yes, well, he's not just metal. That's the thing. He's
Yes,
also
because he's
blues,
like
jazz.
yes, of course, yeah.
He's a Renaissance man. He's
Mm.
my mate from school in the sense that he likes a lot of different types of music and has probably got the most eclectic taste. A taste that certainly at this point didn't really include punk rock. It wasn't what he was interested in or liked. You know, he apparently he used to, in interviews and stuff, if a zine was interviewing him, they'd be like, "Oh, so who are your influences?" And he was like, "The only punk band I'd ever heard that I could sort of nearly get on board with was the Descendants." So I'd just say, "I like the Descendants." That was it. It's probably, I don't know, they're probably catchier or whatever, you know. But I'm sure he's developed a taste or, you know, an appreciation for it, even if it's not his first love.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah, what about yours? You were taken by these two. I trust.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just, you know, so I'll start with like The Longest Line because that's the one that I listened to first.
Sure.
You know, I stuck it on, and immediately, bearing in mind, you know, we've listened to all of the albums up to this point. We're listening to them week upon week, getting our heads around each NoFX album, and listening to The Longest Line. You just realize, you know, these albums before, which I have enjoyed. I have enjoyed the earlier NoFX stuff, but this is NoFX. Like this
Yeah.
feels like the start of like the real stuff. And just sticking on The Longest Line, you know, I'm 30 seconds into the first track and I'm like, oh, yeah, I mean, like this is NoFX. Like this is just,
Yeah.
you know, it's unmistakable.
Mm.
That couldn't be confused for any other band.
No.
Yeah, I've loved it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. I think it's great. And again, we're still on with the absolute banger to open whichever release, The Death of John Smith, which is
Hmm.
probably my favorite song on this EP.
And a long song for NoFX.
It is, yeah. We're pushing 4 minutes on this one,
And
and
this,
it's got some different it's got some different parts as well. It's got its own little miniature decline
hmm
thing
hmm
going on. There's sort of, you know, the three intros before it gets in. They give Hefe you know, a little bit of vocals on here as well. He takes the
yeah,
lead vocal for like 4 lines or something in an amazing little sort of bridge. And you know, I don't think there were many bridges in the previous songwriting of Mike, so
hmm
that's also a progression which is really, really pleasing.
and I think you made a really good point earlier where you said, is the success of these two albums down to the introduction of El Jefe into the lineup? But I think I agree with you in that, like everybody's improving. You know,
Yeah.
it's not just that El Jefe's coming into it, but like, I mean, I'm really impressed with the guitar work, like the rhythm guitar work of
Mm.
Eric Melvin in this. Like, you know, he is a professional musician at this point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well,
um,
he's often I think his job is often to play the octave chords
mhm.
that play the melodies over the top of the rhythm. So they do sort of try, and he plays some solos here and there as well. He's not purely rhythm, but I think for this one they were definitely they basically bought a new car and were seeing how fast it could go. So they're like, right,
Yes.
right, we're going to do more harmonies. Hefe, you're going to be singing this bit. You're going to be putting the trumpet on this. We want you to do some of your voices in this shit. You know, really, really going to town on the new thing. You know, um, it was like when someone gave the Edge from U2 a wah pedal, and then the next album was just swamped in wah, and it is that kind of thing. They were a lot more restrained than U2, to be fair, but you know, it's got that kind of thing to it. But absolutely, that should be the case. You know, um, enjoy and explore that, and I think they do it brilliantly.
And
What
I
was your
think there's a real progression in terms of quality in the songwriting here.
absolutely?
Um, the Longest Line, maybe like up to this point, like this potentially could have been the best song they've written. I think that it's, it's interesting. I mean, I can't believe it's only 2 minutes and 4 seconds because I
Yeah,
think there's a lot in there for that time. But I think it's a really, really, really accomplished in terms of its writing and arrangement.
I don't know that Mike would write something kind of as catchy and accessible until maybe Franco on American.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
On the longest line wiki, it tells you sort of, the artwork and, the different pressings and stuff like that when it came
yeah.
out. This might have been the first release on Fat Records for
Oh, that would
NoFX,
be exciting.
because I believe they would release EPs on Fat Records and their full lengths came out on Epitaph.
Right, yes. So, and to be fair, the first thing they released was a reissue. So this is actually the first,
First new
you know,
material.
yes, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yes, it was PMRC can suck on this. Yeah, they re-released that. But yeah, so it says that the band has denied all suggestions that the title referred to cocaine. I think the longest line, as we would know it here in the UK, is a Q. I think it's literally, I'm just stood at the end. I'm just very unlucky. That's what that song's about.
Yeah, and I think they're very clear with that in the lyrics, aren't
Oh
they?
yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think there's any. This was pre-drug Mike as well, so
I mean, even the artwork is of a long line.
it is. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the bank or wherever it is. Yeah, so there's all that kind of thing. Oh, interesting little side note on that. Dan Seitz, the artist who did that,
Hmm.
uh, he also designed the RKL mascot Beanie Boy, the little cartoon delinquent, and the logo for Fat Records itself.
Oh, cool.
So there you go. It's somewhat. I mean, sort of to me, that's like this person who designed the Coca-Cola logo. It's like, wow, that's just I've seen that every day of my life for since I sort of knew what it was. So the only other info on the Wikipedia is the pop punk band Blink (brackets later Blink 182) covered the longest line on their demo tape Fly Swatter.
I need to hear this because I'm quite intrigued by
You I'm going to say you don't need to.
that.
It is a demo. It is like a really
Oh, okay.
rough demo. The vocals are not good. Mark Hoppus does not. It seemed like someone just left a recorder on while they were sort of mucking around.
I can kind of hear it in Tom DeLonge's voice. I couldn't imagine it in Mark Hoppus's voice.
Yeah,
Interesting.
no. Hoppus takes the lead. I don't think. I don't know if DeLonge does anything on that vocally. He plays the guitar, but yeah,
Mm,
it was a 12-inch EP.
sure.
And it's got 5 songs on it. My favourite being "The Death of John Smith," the first one,
Yeah.
which I really, really like. It's got the longest line itself, as we've spoken about, "Stranded" and "Remnants," and "Kill All the White Men." So prior to so I didn't have the longest line for a very long time. I knew
Hmm.
the song, and I knew "Kill All the White Men" because it was on.
Yeah.
I Heard They Suck Live. But yeah, but so the Death of John Smith and those middle two, I didn't know from such an early time. So yeah, so how did you get on with this one? It's like you say, the moment you press play, it really feels like a different band.
Yeah. It feels like the No Effects we know and love. I will admit, Stranded and Remnants don't really stick in my head. I couldn't really, tell you what they sound like, but I do remember very much enjoying them and that they were in keeping with the quality of the rest of the album.
That's the thing. I think I sort of treat this like one piece
Sure.
because it's about 13 minutes long.
Hmm.
So to put that on and listen to the whole thing is not a big ask. EPs are great for that though. I really like an EP when someone cooks one up nicely. So um, yeah, I think Really, really good work, and I was just super impressed with how clean the guitars were, particularly on this one. On White Trash, they're a bit heavier, but on this one, there's some really, really clean stuff going on. It's impressive.
Absolutely. And like I think I might almost prefer this to White Trash, which I do really, really like, and I think it's very, very strong. But and maybe obviously an EP is easier to make than a full length album, um,
Yes,
but it does feel slightly more cohesive.
I think I may favour it, but only a little bit.
Yeah.
But White Trash has just been around
Hmm.
in my mind for a lot longer, so it's very, very difficult to have a sort of a reasonable response to it. It's going to be tainted with nostalgia. Ugh.
It's
But
also interesting, like how many people are cited as working on the album for Longest Line compared to White Trash, because in Longest Line you just have the four main members credited, but then in White Trash, like there's backing vocals, there's producer, there's engineer, um, you know, there's a couple of engineers actually,
yes,
which
I mean,
is
I
I suppose it's a full length album, so it's more,
yeah, I mean, I imagine there would be engineers and what have you
of course, yeah.
in that. However, I get the impression that they've just not been added to Longest Line because it's not as big a deal
Lucrative, I
as
guess.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's my theory anyway. So yeah. Any other thoughts on Longest Line? I mean, I think that we've got a comedy song on here
Yeah,
as
we
well.
do. And yeah, I think "Kill All the White Man" is a really important No Effects song. Like I feel like they're really turning a corner here. With the inclusion of El Hefe, like the band are no longer for angry white kids. There
Yes,
is, and because they've always stood for and stood with minority communities. I know we've spoken about this
yes,
before, but like that is a real passion of Mike's. He likes people on the periphery. He likes people on the fringe of society.
yes,
Um, and unfortunately, people of certain ethnicities, we all know this, have a tougher time than us white folks. And it's nice that that's mirrored now in the lineup. Yeah, it feels, I don't know. I feel like I don't know, like the personality of NoFX is really coming into focus here.
yeah. I think it's sort of yeah. I think it sort of fills out. It feels like there's a sort of it feels like that Hefe clicks with all of them, and I'm doing
Yeah.
this on a pure sort of the kind of personalities that they put forward at this time and
Hmm.
later on. He's a muso, so Mike's desire to sort of push himself as a songwriter and all the rest of it can be channeled through a better musician. Melvin being sort of very chill and calm and stuff. Hefe's got a sort of a chilled out kind of thing. Sandin and his mucking around and
Hmm.
being a bit of a nuisance and naughty boy and all of that stuff. Hefe's also a mischievous kind of type, that kind of thing. There was a great I think there was a story that Hefe told about him and Lars Frederiksen on a Warped tour, um, floating portaloos, like porta toilets, porta potties, I think they're known in the States. It's very grown up of them, like just floating them down this river by one of the Warp tours, possibly setting them on fire. I can't remember exactly, but I was just like, oh, that's not, just he and Lars Frederiksen walking around really bored, and decided to muck around. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Um, and keep in mind, the interesting thing is that Hefe decided to join NoFX even though he was in Mark Curry's band. Mark Curry, who wrote Perfect Government, which they did a cover of on Punk in Drublic.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of a bit more sort of soulfully singer-songwritery thing, and he had a backing band. He was on a major label, and the tour they did was in tour buses, not just like a van. You know, they're in hotels or all of this kind of thing. You know, doing sort of proper venues, not just like backyard parties and
Yeah.
you know all that kind of thing. And then Mark Curry said, "Well, would you like to be a permanent member of the band?" And NoFX also said, "Would you like to be a permanent member of the band? You know, where we made fun of you for your for having like Tommy Hilfiger aftershave, which he left in a squat because everyone made fun of him for being a bit preeny and all this stuff, and you know, and you know, would you like to play this music that you don't fully understand?" And all this stuff. And he was like, I had way more fun sleeping in a stinking van with NoFX than I did on this major label thing.
It's lovely, isn't it?
It's great, yeah. And he's like, no, I reckon I could do it. And 30 years on, that's still his main job.
Because I think here what really shines through in these two albums, and you've already touched upon it, but it is the friendship. It's the friendship that Hefe's seen. Like, I mean, I know these guys got like get on, whether Hefe's there or not, but there's something about Hefe's personality that really brings them all together, particularly on stage. And it reminds me of. Have you ever seen American Werewolf in London?
I have.
You know, like at the start of American Werewolf in London, the main character and his best friend, they're just the best of friends.
Oh,
like,
right. Yeah.
The film starts and you're like, oh, they are the best of friends. I wish I could be their friend. I feel like that when I watch NoFX since Hefe has joined.
Yes, I think you're right. It's like the antithesis of Withnell and I. It's like the absolute opposite side of the coin. It's like, oh, wow, yeah. These two people should hang around together forever. These two should never see each other again. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. Yeah, I think it makes it makes a bond. I know that there's a certain type of punk band, and I'm gonna say it. It's that kind of either a sort of what people call street punk or sort of hardcore-y types who are always talking about how this is my family, you know, the found family thing, which I'm all for. I believe in that more than biological family and all the rest of it. But sometimes an entire album can feature the word family maybe 90, 100 times.
Yeah.
And, you know, fine. You know, you do you. I wouldn't want to prescribe what people should be writing songs about, but I sort of get the feeling that NoFX don't even really need to say you know what sort of a closer unit they are. It's just sort of obvious.
It's implicit. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, cool. Well, let's if that's all we've got to say on Longest Line. Hello everyone, Eddie here. Red and I hope you're enjoying our show. If you have been and would like to help us make it a little more easily, then you can donate to us at our Ko-fi page, which is ko-fi.com/punkrockelite, or you can look in the show notes for our link tree. If you can't help us financially, we totally understand, but would love it if you spread the word to other people who would like this podcast. We thank you for your continued support. We massively appreciate it. Back to the show. Let's skip over to White Trash, 2 Heebs and a Bean, which was released, let me see, Longest Line was released in May. Oh, gosh. We've just had the 31st anniversary of Longest Line. It was on May the 1st.
I had a theory about the album title, which I'm pretty sure is correct. So White Trash is Eric Sandin.
Yes.
The 2 Heebs are Fat Mike and Eric Melvin, obviously the
They
2
are.
Hebrews.
Yes.
And then a bean is El Hefe, the Mexican jumping bean.
Yes, short for beaner, which is a
Oh, okay.
slur.
Oh, okay.
I think it refers to refried beans.
Oh, okay,
The
sure.
Mexican jumping bean, however, is adorable, and I wish you were correct. But they were messing around with. I mean, originally, I'm not going to read it out loud because it is too unpleasant, much more unpleasant slurs than bean. But there was an alternate title, but Eric Melvin's grandma heard what they were planning on calling it and was horrified that a slur for Jewish people was going to be used on her grandson's album. So
Oh, wow, really?
yeah, I read that somewhere. Said my grandma doesn't like the title. Can we change it? And they went, yeah, go on. For, correctly, I think. Especially if you see what the title was, it's really not good.
Yeah, I think it potentially would have aged badly, but it is also, it is a minority calling themselves, like there's a little
Yes,
bit of reclamation there.
absolutely, and I'm all for that. But we do have to talk about this album, and I'm
Oh yeah. Oh
much
no,
happier
we
that I
shouldn't
don't
say
have
it.
to say it.
We should never say it.
No. I wasn't planning on it, but yeah. Luckily, white trash. As to very white examples of trash, we can say that all day long with impunity. This is the first one to not be produced by Brett Gurwitz.
Right. Okay, sure.
Yep.
And that's interesting because I don't necessarily hear his absence. It's still, like, because I think that he's been so formative in establishing the NoFX sound. But, it still sounds like the NoFX sound here.
Yes, it's. I think the biggest sort of shift in sound comes from Punk and Drublick,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
is 2 years away. That because spoilers for ahead, but basically, Propagandy were one of the first Fat Records bands,
Hmm.
and their album "How to Clean Everything" was released after White Trash and contains all of the elements that one associates with the Fat sound, that very clicky kick drum,
Hmm.
and also the sort of melody and riff combined together. And so NoFX were trying to ape that sound when they
Sure.
did Punk and Drublick. So the Fat sound, Mike credits that Fat sound with Propagandy's release. It was either, I think it must have been 93.
Yeah.
A sound which Propagandy would lose within 2 records, and they became much more sort of thrash than punk rock, straight up punk rock. They're a bit more crossover.
Hmm.
Mike mourns that. I actually think it was a good move, but
Yeah.
that's for another day.
I haven't listened to enough propaganda. I haven't listened
Yeah.
to, like we are doing with NoFX. We've listened to early NoFX. Obviously, I've listened to most of their albums at this point, so I have like a good idea of how they've sounded across their career.
Yeah.
And whilst I've listened to bits of Propaganda, I don't have a full picture of where they've changed and what's changed along the way.
I imagine if you played something off of the first Propaganda album and something off, say, the fifth,
Mm-hmm.
I think there would be a bigger difference than the first and fifth NoFX releases.
Yes, absolutely. Because then I think the NoFX albums, like there's a gentle progression with them. Like I don't think at any point there's ever like a sudden departure from a sound. It feels like they're constantly learning and growing.
There's never a sort of a right angle turn, is there? No, I think
No.
I mean, I may well be missing something entirely, and I'm utterly wrong. But at present, that's how I sort of feel. It does sort of naturally move around a bit, but yeah.
I think War on Errorism is potentially, but again, I mean, I think War on Errorism has some of their strongest tracks, so I'm not dissing it at all.
No.
But like, there's arguments for them moving to a more commercial sound on Franco-American, for instance.
I think that whilst there are still some sort of very fast, hardcore songs on there, there's also some slower stuff. But we're here to talk about white trash, so
Of course, of course.
we'll just no, it's fine. We were leading everyone on a merry dance away. Wikipedia claimed that this is hardcore punk. That's what's in the genre, so that's good.
Interesting as well. We're starting very strong on this album. We're continuing a NoFX tradition of the first track being an absolute banger. Love
Yes,
Sold Out.
do you know what? This might be. I think this might be 7 songs before before it dips a little for me.
Okay, sure.
I think
That's interesting. So that means that it's please play this song on the radio that you're not so keen on.
which is, I mean, the thing is that there's already there's a Stiff Little Fingers song called "You Can't Say Crap on the Radio,"
Right.
and it sort of seems to be covering a very similar. Not that that's I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I don't know. It's sort of.
Do you know what vibe I got from "Please Play This Song on the Radio"?
Yeah, go on.
It feels like a parody of Blink 182. It feels like they're satirizing, pop punk that gets radio airplay, because obviously that isn't a goal for them. But I imagine around this time it is increasingly a goal for other artists, Green Day, etc.
Well, maybe, but I mean, the thing is that Green Day have not even released Dookie yet.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's more. It sounds like Blink 182 to me. I mean, it sounds like they're.
I know, but I don't even
them.
think Blink was a band at the time.
Oh, really?
They're between 1992 and 1995 they were called Blink.
Right, yeah. So I mean,
but that was when they started. So I mean,
yeah. I mean, they're not. The sort of Blink that you parody is when they're doing Enema of the State. Early Blink isn't necessarily. Absolutely.
That's 10 years away.
That's interesting. Then I have no idea what they're doing on this song.
I've just had a quick click on the Blink 182 wiki, and it said that Anne introduced her brother, which I'm guessing is Mark Hoppus, to DeLong on the 2nd of August 1992. So Blink, and then they suddenly became friends and became a band based on that. This was recorded in August 1992. This was made exactly the same time as Blink 182. Isn't that interesting?
It's so interesting because I could have sworn listening to "Please Play This Song on the Radio," it sounds like a similar, you know how All the Small Things is basically like just 3 chords. It sounds like them taking the piss out of that sort of lazy songwriting. I mean, the song kind of keeps going longer than it should with like the same hook over and over again. I thought they were making fun of bad pop punk.
I mean, I think they're definitely making fun of that, just whatever generation was before.
Yeah.
Blink. So it might have been maybe some of the like the Lookout Records bands who were sort of a bit more, not that they were sort of chasing pop, but there were some sort of Lookout bands who were a lot more like sort of 60s pop mixed with sort of Ramones core.
Sure.
Kind of thing. And so I don't know if it was that or if it was but I imagine that there'll have been certain bands in mind when they were making that kind of thing. But it's sort of, it doesn't. And also the thing is that once you've sort of got the joke.
It does go. I mean, that last verse is so unnecessary.
Yeah. And the mad thing is it's still only 2.25 minutes.
Yeah.
Feels longer. And that's bad.
Yeah, I completely agree. It does feel longer. I mean, I don't know how they've managed to make a 2-minute 16 song drag.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when that's the first time I might have a look at my watch or something. But those first 7, really great, and also such a broad selection. I mean, like Sold Out starts amazing, and it sounds huge as well. The way they've got the guitars panned and
it's again, the first, second, and third track of
Yeah.
this album all appear on their greatest hits,
Yes.
which I love. Like I love these these opening tracks.
Mm.
Even though like the names of them don't always stick in your head, they're
Yeah.
always really, really solid.
Also, Mike's voice on this is, and the longest line,
Yeah.
so much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
much stronger.
This must be the time when he started to like write in the right key. I know he's spoken about that, where for a long
Yeah.
time he was writing in the wrong key for his voice, and I'm guessing that these were the two albums where he suddenly realized what key he should be writing in.
Maybe. Something's happened, definitely. So it could be that. I think yeah, and I mean, then you got "Sticking in My Eye," which is a, a real fan favorite. I think the only earlier fan favorite would be like "Green Corn."
Yeah, yeah, I think that's probably yeah.
But yeah, "Sticking in My Eye's got that brilliant. It's got that bass intro that's really really good, and it's
And they're still playing this one
atmosphere.
live
Oh
regularly.
yeah. Melvin sings the verses now because
Yeah,
Mike's voice can't hack it. But when you hear Melvin singing it, it's like he should always have been singing it.
yeah, right.
It just sounds so good. But yeah, it's that bass intro is amazing. Really, really love it, and the and yeah, and really, really nice, different sort of parts again, fitting in a lot of different little bits of song um, into one. That's really, really good. So good.
And I know like we've spoken about this earlier, but I'm really impressed by like how much they embrace Hefe's involvement in these two albums, and particularly in White Trash. Like
Mm,
there are songs that he leads. There's a
yeah.
lot of trumpet. Like I think their reggae, sorry, their ska stuff.
Mm,
I think their ska stuff is immediately improved by the presence of Hefe.
yeah. Well, we've got. I mean, well, let's just have a quick look through here. I mean, he's got his sort of vocal scatting on
Mm-hmm.
Bob, and his trumpet as well, which is just wonderful. Obviously, he sings straight edge and
Yeah.
has the cover of the Minor Threat for those playing the home game, the Minor Threat song, in that jazz thing, and he's got a guitar solo in that as well. Johnny Appleseed, which he
Mm-hmm.
sings, and Bugley. So hang on, so he sings 3 of these songs.
Yeah. It's
Hadn't
like
hadn't even hadn't even realised that before.
like they don't take any time in warming up to his involvement in the band. Like
Yeah,
these are his first two appearances, and I mean, throughout both albums, he is front and center.
yeah.
It's lovely. It's nice.
No, absolutely. They seem really, really pleased with their choice, and they are taking
Yeah.
full advantage of everything they've got. It's I think that's essentially Mama's divorce finally came through, so she's got her hair did, and she's got a, you know what I mean? She's flaunting it now, and that's that's very, very nice to see.
I wonder how familiar with Minor Threat El Jefe was before singing it on this album.
I would imagine not at all. But the great thing is that it doesn't matter because one would argue there is no tune to Straight Edge by Minor Threat.
Or any Minor Threat song. There's a
Yeah,
couple.
there's a
There's
couple,
like one or
but
two.
certainly not Straight Edge, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, this is at least double the length of Straight Edge.
Yeah.
This version, and I think that's. And also, so I don't know if Brian Baker is a member of Bad Religion by this point, but I think the great fun joke of making fun of that kind of thing, but it's done very credibly, and like it's clearly not done by people who couldn't play that if they wanted to, so that's exciting.
if I had to like pick out a couple negatives about the album, I
Sure.
do think there's a couple album tracks on there that I can kind of like take or leave. Like for me, I think the album drops off potentially for me much earlier. Like I'm not that keen on You're Bleeding or The
Right.
Bag. Um,
I prefer both of those to Warm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't really remember Warm, so
Yeah, fair enough. I
it's one of
Want to Be
those
Your
tracks.
Baby is okay.
Yeah,
It's got a sort of a weird um, minor key thing going on that I quite like, and it's sort of quite chuggy and sort of doomy in a way, which I like. I only just sort of looking at it now, it's strange. It doesn't sound weird, but the fact is, you've got Johnny Appleseed and
hmm
Boggly Eyes sandwiching "She's Gone."
I know, right? And but it works.
It really works when listening to it because I'm looking at the track listing now, and
hmm
only now when I'm sort of actually looking at it and what those songs are does it
Yeah,
appear strange, but it definitely works. I think "She's Gone" is a highlight for me, possibly
yeah,
my favorite song on this album. It's amazing because it is, and I think put into sharp relief between the two of the dare I say it wackier songs on the album, having this sort of heartbreaking narrative in "She's Gone," and you've got the harmonies in there, and just a ripper of a solo.
yeah.
The guitar
Absolutely.
solo on that, it's just the whole thing about it is just great. I've always been a huge fan of that song.
There's No Effects remind me of it that there's a an Australian film director I really like called Craig S. Zala, who did Bone Tomahawk, Brawl
Right.
in Cell Block 99, more
Yes.
recently Dragged Along Concrete, and when
Works
he
almost
explained,
exclusive with Hollywood Republicans.
yeah, he does have some sadly not very agreeable political views.
No,
Um,
I've heard his movies are engaging though.
Very interesting filmmaker, and basically when he ever describes what he does is
Mm,
he describes his movies as a highbrow lowbrow like combo platter. I think that's
right.
the wording that he uses,
Okay.
and I think that White Trash is a perfect example of that sort of art. And what I love in
Yeah.
art as well, I love when things are equally, silly and immature, but
Mm.
also thoughtful and provoking. And I think this album is one of those.
This album is an episode of MASH.
There's cross dressers. There's
Well, yeah, I mean,
war.
yeah, obviously, yeah. I mean, that's always my favourite bit of any episode of MASH, to be fair. But yeah, a good healthy dose of Klinger, but also a patient you've come to love may die. just to show you the folly of war.
Lovely.
But I honestly mean that as a huge compliment because
Yeah.
there are other TV shows that have tried to combine those things, and naming no Scrubs, it doesn't always work. Um, so to be fair, Scrubs occasionally got close, but they insisted on having Zach Braff in it, so obviously it was going to falter. But
I think early Scrubs is pretty solid. I think
no,
it tails off towards the end, but I think there's some good
yeah.
stuff in there.
No. I agree. I'm during during it. I was concussed
hmm
about 14 months ago, and then just as I started to sort of get a little bit better, I got a job, and one of the things I did to pass the time in that job was I listened to a lot of podcasts, and for some reason I ended up listening to the Scrubs podcast that Zach Braff and Donald Faison did, where
Oh, cool.
they go back through every episode of Scrubs and talk about it with different cast members and producers and all the rest of it,
hmm
and it got and I've been trying not to let this happen with this, but I fear we might step over the line at one point because we're going to have to talk about a particular song. But it became more about fitting in all of the in jokes than actually getting around to talking about stuff. So they'll be like an episode that I remember being genuinely emotionally affecting, and they're like, "Oh yeah," and then the patient dies. Anyway, oh, have you bought some new Nikes off the Nike app? Yeah, I have. I'm naughty. And then I stopped listening to it because it became too in joke. Had a bit of a banger of a theme tune.
Did they use No Scrubs by TLC?
No, they had a little gospel song that someone wrote for them, and then they sang it, and had Donald Faison singing, so it sounded good.
Nice. One thing that I forgot, and found quite interesting listening to this is, it's got Bob on it.
Yeah,
which is, a quintessential NoFX track.
I think actually, yeah. When I said "Sticking in My Eye," might have been I think they got two fan favorites in a row.
Yeah.
"Sticking in My Eye" and Bob. I mean, I think I've seen those two songs every time I've seen them. I think there are certain things that those two maybe no.
Yeah, maybe for me as well.
There's very little. I think since they've written it, "Dinosaurs Will Die," I don't think they leave that off many set lists either, just because.
I think they put in "Dinosaurs Will Die" and "Separation of Church and Skate" in pretty much all their set lists.
I think so, yeah. But they try and mix it up as much as possible. Apparently, I saw an interview with Flogging Molly, of all people, who said that Fat Mike keeps all of the set lists, or a copy of the set lists, for every city, so that when they go there again, he can look at what they played last time and make sure they mix it up a bit.
That's very clever.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it's that, or the Metallica model that they were running for years was, right, are we doing an hour show? Well, that's the set list. Are we doing a 2-hour show? That's the set list.
Yeah.
Same pauses for banter or whatever. If that's, and if you are treating it like a job, then I suppose that's what you do, isn't it? Like when the Ramones' last gig, when they played that, Johnny Ramone literally handed his guitar, the Morrisite or whatever it's called, that guitar he had for the whole Ramones. He just gave it to Eddie Vedder and said, "Don't need this anymore." He wasn't intending on playing music again because he'd retired. He saw it like
Eddie
a job,
Vedder
like he worked.
Got Joey Ramone's guitar. Oh, sorry, Johnny Ramone's guitar.
Johnny Ramone's guitar? I don't think so, because I think it's currently in the Ramones Museum in Berlin, which is where I saw it. Really which cool. Eddie Vedder may have. I think it was Eddie Vedder, or he just handed it to somebody who worked at the venue or something. It was like, "I don't need this anymore," and Eddie Vedder said, "I will give you however many thousand." He just bought it off the guy. It's like, "I need, this needs to be sort of preserved in some way." I think I'm getting that story 90-80% right, but yeah. But the point being is that he just went, "I don't need that anymore." He considered being a Ramone a job, the same way that if you stop being an electrician because that was your job, you don't need to keep all of your fancy electrician's kit. You can just keep, if you never intend on, changing a fuse ever again. So
I have
NoFX don't work that way.
It reminds me of a similar story. Basically, when I was growing up, my dad worked in the music business. He did a lot of promotion for album sales and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it just so happened that he was working on a Bryan Adams album, and that involved in one of one of the big HMVs, one of the big Virgin megastores or something. They had this giant, I don't know, sort of 100-foot long Stratocaster made out of fiberglass. And basically the record company couldn't store it anywhere. They didn't have anywhere to store it. And my dad just had happened to have an empty barn that it would fit in. So we kept it in there, and then it basically became an absolute nightmare because the record label wouldn't take it back. At one point, Hard Rock Cafe said, "We'll have it," and they took it down to Hard Rock Cafe in London, but then couldn't fit it through the door. So it got sent back to us.
Wow.
And the binman used to come up and take photos next to it because we had to keep it outside and eventually, like, because we needed the barn back. Like, so there you go.
That's
I don't know.
amazing.
Not quite no effects, but it's something.
No, but sometimes, I mean, to be honest, you could have sold that to the Darkness if it had hung around long enough,
Yes.
and Justin Hawkins could have
Genius.
swung around on that from the ceiling. Oh,
Maybe that's where it is.
maybe, yeah, it could be. Well, I saw the Darkness in Sheffield at some sort of arena or stadium. I forget which one. It was when Ash was supporting, because I'm friends with Ash. They gave us tickets, and we went. And I was never that bothered. I thought the Darkness were great at what they did and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Watched it, and I was like, okay. And also sort of like, I don't normally like the idea of seeing a band in a stadium, but I'm like, well, if it's the Darkness, that sort of makes sense. That's what they've been aiming for forever. So I'm like, okay, fine, yeah, and why not? And there's a song, a real AC/DC Whole Lot of Rosie style song called Knockers off their second album. And Justin Hawkins literally floats around in a pair of fiberglass tits above the crowd on a crane. And I thought, well, if I'd have said no, I would never have seen that. So
Rammstein, eat your heart out.
So the... Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, exactly. So the oversized fiberglass is definitely not something that the Darkness were allergic to.
It's funny you mentioned stadium bands, actually, because the venue I work at, the Lead Mill, we just announced yesterday Def Leppard.
Oh wow!
Def Leppard are coming to do
home turf, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like their hometown. It's the first
right.
Fully electric show they've done in Sheffield that isn't in an arena in 40 years. So it's like a big
amazing.
deal. But I mentioned it to my girlfriend's dad today, and he was just like, "They're fucking shite stadium rock, glam rock band. What a load of shit." I suppose, art is subjective.
Of course, yeah. Those first couple of Def Leppard albums sounded like Maiden.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're an interesting band. I would say, look, we all like different types of music, but they are objectively successful. And to have a band that sold that many records come and play our 900 capacity venue is pretty special.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let's talk more about White Trash, because this is an album that begs to be talked about. It's wonderful. We've got our namesakes, the song written about us, Liza and Louise.
Of course, yes. Which again, is a little bit of a highlight for me. Fat Mike's really leaning into the BDSM kink lifestyle that he enjoys. And
sure.
I feel like here there's more of a handle on it, whereas previously on tracks like S&M Airlines, it feels like he's getting to grips with that. But at this point, it feels like he's had experiences and he wants to talk about them.
S&M Airlines is like a sort of distancing yourself from that. It was like the idea that all of this happened and he didn't enjoy it. And in this one, it's
That's
like these things are happening. Oh no, I'm sure, absolutely, but not ready to say I proper dig on this publicly. But then and this one is like, oh look, some people are having some kink and are enjoying it. It's not me, obviously. It's those people I've made up. And so there's still a bit of distance there, and we're getting closer. We're getting closer to the outing of Michael. So, but no, I think it's great. Also, I sort of feel like "Please Play This Song on the Radio" is like a first draft of musically is like a first draft of Liza and Louise.
Sure. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you've only got one song in between them, and I think they're sort of too similar, and not in a good way. Maybe that's why I don't care for "Please Play This Song on the Radio."
Yeah, I
because
mean,
Liza
I
and
agree
Louise
with
is
you.
so good, and
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I agree with you. Like, there's not loads to love about "Please Play This Song" on the radio. It's one of
no,
the weaker elements of the album.
sure, but yeah, Liza and Louise, it's got great harmonies on it. It's and again, it's got one of those. I'm going to call them a leech hook, which is there's a little bit where the after Robin Leach, a random hand, where the and you know she wanted more. That line in it is a real. You can sing along with a lot of it, but you know she wanted more. There's
Hmm.
something super hooky about that,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I think that's another one of those last minute hooks, which and ever since Robin mentioned that, I've been noticing that a lot more in NoFX's music, and yeah, they sort of make you wait for it, but when it's there, it's properly good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is there shows really interesting songwriting and arrangement in these albums, and I think there's interesting little production elements. I mean, I know like Bob is only 2 minutes and 2 seconds, but there's some really interesting stuff going on there in terms of its
Yeah,
production.
well,
Like
it's weird, isn't it?
again,
Because it's
sorry, but again, you get the thing with no effects where like right at the end of the song is kind of like the bit that you remember. I mean, like the
yeah,
outro to Bob is like the bit of Bob that I remember,
yeah,
and you get that a lot with no effects tracks.
yeah, and a huge chunk of Bob is a trumpet solo
Yeah,
where you
it's
would
great.
arguably have put a second verse. There isn't one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's sort of, or it's sort of like a. I suppose it's like a bridge, I guess. But yeah, this sort of extended little trumpet solo, which again is you know getting the most out of your new Hefe. You know that Mike is clearly someone who gets a new appliance and sits down and reads the instructions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They're just like, so like, oh, we've got a Hefe, right? What can it do? Oh my god, it can do all of these things. This is incredible. What you mean? You mean it could play guitar and trumpet in the same song if someone just brings the trumpet up? Okay, yeah, great, we'll do it.
I think there's like I think the jazz elements of the album are tough to ignore. Like I think it's subtle, but
Mm,
like it feels like and again, this might be El Jefe's involvement, as I know he's like quite an accomplished jazz musician, but like it's not
yeah.
something that I think's been in the forefront of their previous work, and I can really hear, I can hear jazz.
Yes. Well, I mean, straight edge notwithstanding, obviously, because that is sort
Of
of
course.
pure jazz like that. But I think there's more melody in the bass line,
Hmm.
the bass lines. I think there's more of those kind of things because there's sort of like the walking bass line in Bob when it starts off
Yeah.
boom doom doom doom, really really solid. The most solid sort of reggae slash ska bass work that we've seen so far. You
Hmm.
got that nice one on Life of Riley. And that's pretty nice.
Hmm.
And I think that's really really good. But I think when you've got, I think you can do it with more confidence when there's like some bona fide jazz happening on it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's sort of it adds a credence to it because Hefe went to college or whatever for music and studied all of that stuff there. So is a trained musician you know for want of a sort of a better word, but is trained to do that, but also learnt how to do harmonies and barbershop and all that kind of stuff, and the
Hmm.
harmonies. I mean, possibly my favorite tiny section. It comes in "She's Gone." There's a bridge in there. Says Carolyn stands alone in the schoolyard. All the other children have gone, and the harmonies on that are just as heartbreaking as the scenario. It's just so good. This feels like it's almost Hefe's album in a way.
Absolutely, yeah. And I completely agree in that, the harmonies really shine through here.
Because they don't sound like Bad Religion harmonies. They sound like No
No.
Effects harmonies.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
And that's the best thing that No Effects can sound like is No Effects. That's how it's, supposed to be. Sometimes you hear a band and you think, you can tell from which cup they've been drinking deeply. That's just how it is sometimes. This is when, like we say, we've been saying it all along, No Effects begin to sound like No Effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
For better or for worse. To my mind, better. To a lot of other people's worse, but
Any final thoughts on this album?
Good question. Good question. I think this is the first one where I would just say, yeah, give it a go, even if I had a 30% vibe that someone would get on with it.
I agree, but I think that of the two, I would suggest listening to The Longest Line.
Of course, I forgot we'd even covered The Longest Line. I was just too busy wrapped up in the white trash. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, yeah, I'd say that one because you've got a catchy song
Mm-hmm.
in the form of The Longest Line. You've got the hardcore thing. You've got the sort of RKL vibes and stuff. You've got Kill All the White Man. You've got all sorts of stuff on there in a very small amount of time as well, and it's 14 minutes long, so it's not a huge ask.
It's probably a good, because we ask our interviewees, if they had to introduce someone to NoFX, what would they start with? I think Longest Line is a really good idea, as you said. It's under 14 minutes. You get a good sort of range of what NoFX do.
Yeah,
I think this is a great starting point for anyone getting into the band.
I think I think it's a strong contender. Absolutely. If there's someone who already likes heavy music or fast music or that kind of thing, then I think definitely. I think if someone is coming from a different genre thing, maybe there's some other ones that are better. But
Yeah,
if
definitely.
they're already on board with stuff, it's the same way you wouldn't recommend gherkins to everyone, but if you find out they like pickled onions, you might. I've not had my dinner long ago. I mean, I should be fine, but apparently I'm just thinking about food now. But I think it's that kind of thing. If you're down with this kind of thing, then I think that this might be something that makes you go, "Oh, there is something to No Effects."
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, a resounding yes from both of us on both of these.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, we'll meet you in the outro for something of a debrief, so we won't be long. The Longest Line and White Trash, 2 Heebs and a Bean.
What a lovely, lovely, fun. I've had a lot of fun listening to these albums, and I've had a lot of fun discussing them today. I also think potentially, I feel like with these two albums, as we've said, NoFX have really found their feet and they're coming into their own. But I also think, I've really enjoyed making this episode, and I think we're starting to get our heads around how we're doing whatever it is that we're doing.
Oh yeah, if you've been listening, I mean, yes, our earlier episodes probably do make liberal animation look like So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes. That's just how it is. But if we didn't start, we wouldn't be where we were now. So you just get on with it, don't you? And thank you if you've been listening to those. Do please let other people know. Do you know what? How would you introduce somebody to Punk Rock Elite, a podcast about No Effects?
Hey,
how meta! I'll do it with this episode personally. So. I'll do it. No, actually, I'll do it with one of the interview episodes. Let us use the charisma of our guests to snare people in. I think that's probably wise. If you've got any feelings on on The Longest Line or White Trash, then punkrockelitepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on Insta and let us know, because we'd love to hear about it. I think this is when a lot of fans start to sort of all come together. I think there are people who sort of like the mid-90s stuff onwards who still go, oh yeah, no, White Trash was all right. People who like the earlier stuff who go, well, White Trash was the last good album, and all that stuff. So this might be where the meeting of fans can take place. This is sacred ground where there's no fighting. So fingers crossed anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. So and also do keep up with the with our requests for grassroots venues and record labels and bands as well, if you wish to, because we'd love to hear more about those and promote them.
Absolutely, we would.
So I don't know that we've got anything. We've gotten really far ahead of ourselves. We're not going to lie here. We've got really far ahead of ourselves with the recordings, where we have got sort of maybe a month's worth in the can already. So we might start dropping a couple a week, and you'll know that by now because we'll have already done it. Because we want to do something a bit special for the end of May when we go and see NoFX at Leeds.
We've got a couple interesting, like really special episodes coming up that we want to make sure are dropped in a timely manner.
Absolutely. So we might be a little bit out of whack with the timing. We might talk about something that's happened and then talk about looking forward to that thing in another one. I'm not going back and re-editing the episodes. We'll just have to live with the time paradox. Because all the episodes are good and can be listened to in any order. That's the good thing. We didn't want to. It's not an audio drama. There's not going to be spoilers and stuff. So. Thank you ever so much for listening. We'll see you next time. Is that everything? I think that's everything.
That's everything. We'll see you soon.
That's everything.
Have a great week.
Absolutely. Do have a great week. And we will see you at some point very, very soon. Take care, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Punk Rock Elite. It was a Pick Scraped and Fruitcake co-production by Eddie French and Red Redmond. If you're not following us on Instagram or subscribed to the podcast, please do. The main theme and production was done by Eddie French. Please contact us at punkrockelitepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.